Living alone as you grow older is frequently portrayed in brochures and movies as a peaceful, empowering experience where you finally possess the freedom to do what you want, when you want, without interruptions or obligations to others. While there is certainly truth to that independence, there is another side to the story that is rarely discussed until you are walking through the empty rooms yourself. The reality of solitary living in your later years is a complex tapestry woven from freedom and silence, autonomy and vulnerability. It begins not with a dramatic event, but with the quiet that fills the hallways. I remember reading about a woman who started leaving the radio on in the background while doing her chores just to fill the air with some noise, and another man who listened to podcasts throughout the day just to feel like someone was talking to him. I found myself doing the same, realizing that the quiet can be a heavy guest if you do not manage it well, and finding ways to break that silence can make a huge difference in how your home feels. But beyond the psychological weight of the quiet, the most immediate practical realization is that you have to be your own emergency backup. One of the biggest surprises about living alone in your later years is understanding that you are your own safety net, because there is no one around to notice if something goes wrong immediately. I recall a terrifying story of a person who fell and wasn't found for hours or even days because no one was checking on them regularly, which led me to adopt habits that might seem extreme to the young, but are necessary for us. I started carrying my phone everywhere, even placing it within reach when I shower, just in case. I also took the advice of a woman on an online forum who installed an emergency key lockbox outside her house so that trusted friends or family could get in without breaking a window if something ever happened. These are the unglamorous precautions that give you the peace of mind to continue living alone confidently. Once you settle into the safety of your environment, you must confront the reality of your biology, specifically the battle that happens every time you open your eyes. There is a specific struggle that greets you in the early hours that many doctors simply dismiss as old age. I used to wake up feeling a heavy stiffness, a sensation I jokingly called morning rigor mortis, accompanied by a brain fog that made me feel disconnected from the world. For a long time I accepted this as my inevitable destiny, believing the common misconception that these symptoms were just due to age. However, a wise friend, one wise woman sharing with another, explained that these heavy sensations often have a specific cause: dehydration. It turns out that sleeping is a dehydrating event, and simply breathing through the night causes you to lose a significant amount of moisture. If you reach for a cup of coffee immediately upon waking, as I did for decades, it is like trying to drive your car without oil. I changed my ritual based on this wisdom, realizing that I wasn't losing my mind or my vitality solely to the passage of time. I was often just thirsty. Now, instead of rushing to the coffee pot, I drink a large glass of water, about 16 ounces, with a pinch of sea salt immediately after waking up. It sounds too simple to be a medical intervention, but it is not magic, it is biology. That water hits the stomach, and within minutes, the microscopic capillaries in the brain open up. I learned to treat those first few minutes of the day as a window of opportunity to fertilize my brain rather than a chore. By the time I have finished that glass, usually within 30 minutes of waking up, the fog lifts and I feel capable of facing the day. This shift in the morning routine is critical because it sets the tone for everything else. When you live alone, your daily routine becomes sacred. Without a partner or housemate to share responsibilities or spontaneous plans, your routine becomes your stability. I read about a woman in her 70s who starts her mornings by playing the same song while making breakfast just to fill the quiet house with energy, and a man who waters his garden every evening, not just for the plants, but for the sense of purpose and structure it gives his day. These small rituals keep you grounded. However, maintaining that ground requires physical effort that is easy to neglect when no one is watching. The temptation to become sedentary is a silent trap. Living alone often means fewer reasons to get up and move. Without a partner encouraging you to go for a walk, it is easy to fall into a lifestyle where the chair becomes your primary location. I didn't realize how much less active I was until my body started to stiffen up, a common complaint among those of us who live solo. I learned that mobility is not about vanity. It is about dignity. It is about the ability to carry your own groceries and navigate your own home. To combat this, I incorporated a simple movement routine that takes only 7 minutes. I march in place, I do simple stretches in the door frame to open my chest, and I do it religiously. I remember the story of Nancy, who was able to put aside her walker simply by committing to these small, consistent movements. It taught me that we must be intentional about physical activity because no one else is going to do it for us. However, once you are up and moving, you face the practical reality of fueling that body. Cooking for one is deceptively difficult, not because the skill fades, but because the motivation does. It feels easy to justify a dinner of tea and toast or a frozen meal because making a full dish for one person seems like too much effort. I have seen so many of my peers default to this, thinking that because they are older, they need less food. But the truth is the opposite, a fact that shocked me when I first learned it. Our bodies develop something called anabolic resistance as we age, meaning we actually become less efficient at processing protein. We don't need less. We need more just to maintain the muscle we have. I had to reframe my time in the kitchen. It stopped being a chore I did for a family and became an act of self-care I performed for myself. I started aiming for 25 to 30 grams of protein at a meal, not because I want to be a bodybuilder, but because I want to be able to lift my own laundry basket. I learned to batch cook on weekends, making soups or stews that could last for days, turning the effort of 1 hour into the sustenance of a week. One woman in an online community put it perfectly when she said that learning to love cooking for yourself changes your perspective entirely. It reminds you that you are worth the effort of a hot, nutritious meal. Yet even with a strong body and a good diet, the environment you live in can turn against you. This is another harsh reality they don't print in the retirement brochures. The home you raised your family in may become your adversary. Keeping up with home maintenance is overwhelming when energy levels dip. Tasks like cleaning gutters or mowing the lawn, which used to be weekend chores, can become sources of dread. I recall reading about a woman who kept a list of home projects that needed to be done and found herself paralyzed by it, letting chores slide simply because she no longer had the stamina. It wasn't laziness, it was physics. The house was too big for one pair of hands. This leads to a crossroads that many of us face alone. The decision to downsize or to hire help. There is no shame in admitting that cleaning the gutters is no longer safe. I eventually decided to simplify. Decluttering becomes a profound psychological exercise when you live alone. Without a spouse to argue over what to keep, you are left alone with your memories. Every book, every trinket, every piece of furniture holds a story, and letting them go feels like erasing parts of your life. But as I cleared the space, I found a strange freedom. As one man in his late 60s shared, downsizing isn't just about having less to dust. It's about making your living space a reflection of who you are now, not who you were 20 years ago. A smaller space means less maintenance, which translates to more energy for the things that actually bring joy. And you will need that energy to manage the distortion of time. If the physical challenges of living alone are the waves on the surface, the psychological shifts are the currents underneath. One of the most disorienting aspects that no one warns you about is how your relationship with time begins to warp. When you live with a family, your day is structured by external cues: the school bus arriving, a spouse returning from work, the rhythm of shared meals. But when you are alone, those markers vanish. I remember a period shortly after my retirement when I would look at the clock and feel a sudden panic, realizing I had lost entire hours to staring out the window, or worse, not knowing if it was Tuesday or Saturday. A man in an online forum confessed that he frequently lost track of the days of the week entirely, floating in a nebulous haze where time stretched out too long or slipped away unnoticed. This timelessness sounds freeing, but it can quickly become a trap. I learned that to maintain my sanity, I had to manufacture my own rhythm. It couldn't be rigid, or it would feel like a prison, but it had to be there. I started designating specific days for specific tasks. Mondays became grocery days. Thursdays were for cleaning the house. It gave the week a shape again. Another gentleman I spoke with found his anchor in a garden. He watered his plants every evening at the same time, finding purpose in that small structure. The danger of this unstructured time is that it leaves too much room for self-neglect. There is a voice that starts to whisper when you are the only one in the house. Who are you doing this for? It asks why you should bother putting on real clothes when no one will see you, or why you should bother setting the table. I have read countless stories of people who slowly slid into a gray existence where they skipped showers simply because there was no audience to object. It is a slippery slope from comfort to depression. I had to have a stern conversation with myself in the mirror one morning. I realized that by neglecting these small rituals, I was telling myself that I wasn't an audience worth dressing up for. That needed to change. I adopted a philosophy that self-care is a non-negotiable act of respect. Now I get dressed every morning, even if I am not leaving the house. I read about a woman who takes this a step further. She lights candles in the evening and puts on a face mask while reading a book, treating her Tuesday night with the same reverence she would a date night. She said it was a small ritual. but it made her feel nurtured. We have to remind ourselves that we deserve the same care and attention we would give to a guest, even when the only guest is the person in the mirror. This sense of self-worth becomes critical when you face the shifting tides of your social life. One surprising thing about living alone as you get older is how social invitations start to dwindle. It is rarely malicious. Friends move away, retire to different states, or pass on, and the busy lives of younger family members revolve around their own chaotic orbits. I remember a woman sharing in a thread that she used to wait by the phone, feeling a growing bitterness as the silence stretched on, wondering why she had been forgotten. But here is the secret I wish I had known sooner. You cannot wait to be chosen. You must be the one who chooses. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring and decided to become the architect of my own social life. It requires a specific kind of courage to admit you are lonely and to extend the first hand, but the results are life-changing. I didn't wait for a book club to invite me. I started one. I read about a man in his 60s who felt the walls closing in, so he started a neighborhood walking group where a small group would meet every Sunday to explore local trails. He didn't just find exercise, he found a tribe. You realize that you have the freedom to design your fun. If you love old movies, host a watch party. If you like crafting, invite a neighbor for a DIY night. When you host, you control the environment. Taking charge of your social existence shifts you from a passive victim of isolation to an active participant in your community. Ultimately, living alone is a duality. The quiet can be a heavy burden, as I mentioned before, but it can also be a profound gift. It offers a space to think, reflect, and recharge that is unavailable in a bustling household. You have the freedom to create the life you want, surrounding yourself with what makes you happy, whether that is a beloved pet, a garden, or just the peace of your own company. You are the guardian of your own well-being, and while the challenges are real, the capacity to live with dignity and joy is entirely within your hands.